It was just another cold night in the city. The streets were quiet, the lights from tall buildings reflecting off the wet pavement. Most people were already home, tucked under blankets. But not everyone. Some still had work to do, and one of them was a man who worked as a security guard at a big office building downtown. He wasn't rich. He didn't wear expensive clothes or drive a fancy car. He wore a uniform, carried a flashlight, and walked around the same building every night, making sure everything was safe. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and he took pride in doing it well. That night, the rain came down hard. The wind shook the trees and made the windows rattle. Around midnight, something strange happened. A loud crash echoed through the empty street, metal hitting metal, glass shattering, followed by silence. The guard rushed to the front door and looked out. Near the entrance, a luxury car had slammed into a lamppost. Smoke rose from the engine and the windshield was completely shattered. Inside, the driver sat slumped over the wheel, not moving. Without thinking, the guard grabbed his jacket, stepped outside into the rain and ran toward the car. The water soaked him in seconds. His shoes slipped on the wet ground, but he kept going. He reached the car and tried opening the door. It was jammed. He could see blood on the driver's head. Time was running out. He kicked the window as hard as he could. On the third try, it cracked open. He reached inside, unbuckled the seatbelt, and pulled the man free. The driver was unconscious, barely breathing. The guard laid him down carefully on the sidewalk, checked his pulse, and started giving first aid. He didn't know who this man was, but he knew he couldn't wait for help to arrive. He had to act now. Minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance. The ambulance was coming. By then, the guard was soaked, shaking from the cold, and his hands were trembling. But he stayed with the man until paramedics took over. Only after they loaded the driver into the ambulance did he realize what he had done. He had left his post. He had broken the rules. He hadn't called in. He had acted on instinct, and now there might be consequences. When he got back inside the building, he found a message waiting for him. His supervisor wanted to talk in the morning. The next day, the video started circulating online. Someone had filmed the whole thing from a nearby balcony. You could see the crash, the man running out into the rain, risking everything to save a stranger. People were moved. They shared the clip everywhere. Comments poured in. Real hero right there. This man deserves a medal. More people need to care like that. By lunchtime, the video had millions of views. News stations picked it up. Suddenly, this quiet, humble worker was being talked about across the country. But while the world saw a hero, his boss saw something else. A rule broken. Later that afternoon, he was called into the office. Two managers sat behind a desk, looking serious. There was no thank you, no mention of bravery, just a letter handed to him. He opened it slowly. His stomach dropped. He was fired. They said company policy was clear. Guards couldn't leave their posts unless instructed. Even though he had saved a life, even though the public was calling him a hero, the company had to maintain standards. He tried to explain. He told them he couldn't just stand there and watch someone die. But the decision was final. He walked out of the building with nothing but his belongings in a small box. The same place he had worked at for years, the same halls he had patrolled night after night were now closed to him. Back home, he sat on the couch in silence. His family didn't know what to say. He had done the right thing, hadn't he? Why? Did it feel so wrong? Outside, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted interviews. Strangers were sending messages of support. Some offered money. Others asked if he needed a job. But none of that mattered to him right now. What mattered was that he had lost the only job he had, trying to do the right thing. As night fell again, he stood by the window watching the city lights blink through the rain. He thought about the man in the car. Did he survive? Was he awake yet? Did he even know who had saved him? He didn't have answers. All he knew was that sometimes, doing the right thing came with a price, and he was starting to pay it. The days passed slowly after he lost his job. He kept busy trying to find new work, sending out applications, calling old friends, asking if they knew of any openings. But nothing came. The city was tough, jobs were scarce, and most places wanted someone younger or someone with different skills. At home, things got quiet. Not the kind of quiet that felt peaceful, but the kind where everyone was thinking the same thing. What happens next? He tried not to show it, but inside, he was hurting. He had done something good, something brave, and instead of being praised, he was punished for it. It didn't feel fair. But life rarely was. Still, people hadn't forgotten what he did. Online, the video kept spreading. People talked about him on social media, on radio shows, even on morning news programs. Some said he should get an award. Others argued that companies shouldn't punish people for saving lives. One day, a reporter showed up outside his house, then another, and another. They stood behind yellow tape, holding microphones, asking questions like, "How does it feel to be a hero?" and "Do you regret losing your job?" He didn't want to talk at first. He wasn't looking for attention. But one evening, he stepped outside and gave a short statement. "I saw someone hurt. I couldn't just walk away. If I had, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself." That clip went viral again, but this time someone important was watching. Days later, a man woke up in a hospital bed. His head hurt, his body felt stiff. Machines beeped softly around him. Nurses checked his vitals. Doctors spoke in hushed tones. He didn't remember much, just flashes of rain, broken glass, and then nothing. As he recovered, the nurses told him how lucky he was, that someone had pulled him from his car before help arrived. That without that person, he might not have made it. He asked to see the video. They played it for him. The blurry footage of a lone figure running into the storm, breaking through the window, pulling him out, and staying by his side until help came. He watched it over and over. Then he asked who that person was. When they told him, he sat quietly for a long time. Later that night, he picked up the phone. He called his assistant and gave clear instructions. "Find that man. Find out what happened to him. And make sure he knows I haven't forgotten what he did." The assistant worked fast. Within hours, he learned everything. The job loss, the struggle, the silence from the company that once employed him. The man in the hospital didn't say much. He just nodded and said, "Take care of it." Over the next few days, calls were made, emails were sent. A meeting was set up between the man's team and the former employer. They offered something simple, money to bring the guard back, plus a bonus for his bravery. But the company refused. They said they couldn't break policy. That rules were rules, even for heroes. The man in the hospital heard the answer and smiled, not because he was happy, but because he understood now. These people didn't care about doing the right thing. They cared about control. So he made a new plan. He reached out, directly. He sent a message to the man who saved his life, offering a personal job, safe, secure, and well-paid. A role working with his foundation, helping others. But when the message arrived, the guard read it carefully, then shook his head. He replied with just a few words. "Thank you, but I don't want anything for saving a life. I just want to go back to living mine." That response hit harder than any speech could. The man in the hospital realized something. He couldn't undo what had been done. He couldn't force the company to change. He couldn't erase the pain or the stress, but he could do something unforgettable, something that would remind the world that heroes still mattered. And so, he started making calls again. This time, not for money or jobs, but for something bigger. Surprise. Late one night, while the guard was asleep, a convoy rolled into his neighborhood. 10 vehicles, shiny and powerful, each one worth more than most people made in years. They lined up in front of his small house. Lamborghini, Rolls-Royce, Tesla, Mercedes, BMW, Range Rover, Ferrari, Porsche, Maserati, Bentley, one after another. Neighbors peeked out their windows. Kids ran outside in pajamas, phones in hand, recording everything. By morning, the street was packed with curious onlookers. Inside the house, the guard woke up confused. He opened the door and stared at the line of cars stretching down the block. He walked outside barefoot, wearing yesterday's clothes. He looked at the cars, at the crowd, at the buzzing phones. Then he noticed something on the windshield of the nearest one, a note. He picked it up and read, "You risked everything to save a stranger. Now it's my turn to return the favor. These are yours. Not because you asked for them, but because you deserved better all along." He read it again, and again. His hands trembled. His eyes filled. This wasn't just a gift. It was a message. Someone finally saw him, not as a rule breaker, not as a liability, but as a man who chose to do the right thing, even when it cost him everything. Word spread fast. Reporters showed up within the hour. Cameras flashed, questions flew. But all he could think about was the moment he pulled that man from the wreck. Did he know this would happen? No. Could he ever imagine waking up to 10 luxury cars parked outside his door? Never in a million years. But maybe, just maybe, it meant that sometimes the world did notice. Sometimes, kindness found a way to fight back, and sometimes the price of doing the right thing didn't have to be so high. The sun was barely up when the first reporter showed up outside his house. By mid-morning there were more than 10 of them, standing behind tripods, holding microphones, cameras rolling, asking questions he didn't know how to answer. He stood on his porch, barefoot, still in his pajamas, watching the crowd grow. People from all over had come, some just curious, others wanting to take pictures, some bringing signs that said things like "Real Hero" and "Thank you for saving a life." Inside the house, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. Messages poured in from every corner of the internet, some from strangers saying they were proud of him, others from people offering jobs, free food, even housing. One person offered to pay off his bills. Another wanted to start a scholarship in his name. But none of it felt real. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. He was just a regular man who did something brave. And now, somehow, the whole world was watching. Later that morning, a black car pulled up quietly. Not flashy like the others parked out front, but clean, expensive looking. Two men stepped out, one older, one younger, and walked up to the door. They introduced themselves as part of the Billionaires team. The older one spoke first. "We're here on behalf of the man you saved," he said. "He wants to make sure you understand what's happening." He nodded slowly, still not quite sure what to think. "He's been watching everything unfold," the man continued. "And he wants to do more than just thank you. He wants to help fix what went wrong." He listened carefully, arms crossed, trying to stay calm. "You've already done enough," he said quietly. "No," the older man replied. "You did the hard part. Now it's our turn." They explained that the billionaire had made a decision, not just to reward him, but to create something bigger, a foundation dedicated to helping people like him, everyday heroes who risk their lives, their jobs, or their safety for others. The idea was simple. If someone did the right thing and lost because of it, this foundation would be there to support them, financially, emotionally, legally, whatever they needed. He didn't say much at first, he just looked down at the ground. "I didn't do it for money," he finally said. "I know," the man replied, "but sometimes doing the right thing shouldn't leave you broke." They talked for a while longer, about the cars, about the attention, about the pressure he was under now. They told him the billionaire respected his decision to decline the job offer, but hoped he'd consider being part of the foundation in another way, maybe as an advisor, maybe just as a voice. He thought about it. Not for the money, not for the fame, but for the message. Because maybe this could mean something. That same day, the billionaire appeared on national television. He sat in a sleek studio looking calm, dressed in dark clothes, speaking directly into the camera. "I want to talk about courage," he began. "Not the kind you see in movies. Not the kind that wins medals or headlines. I'm talking about the quiet kind. The kind that makes someone run into the rain to save a stranger even when they know they might lose everything." He paused, then continued. "This man, this security guard, did something most of us only imagine doing. He saw a life in danger and didn't hesitate. He didn't care who I was. He didn't think about the cost. He just acted." A clip played behind him. Black and white footage of the crash, the man pulling him from the car, waiting with him until help arrived. "This is the kind of courage we should celebrate," the billionaire said. "Not just with words, not just with likes and shares, but with action." Then he announced the creation of the Langford Courage Fund, a new initiative designed to protect and support everyday heroes. "If someone risks their livelihood to help another human being," he said, "they shouldn't have to suffer for it. This fund will provide financial support, legal protection, and long-term opportunities to anyone who chooses humanity over rules." The announcement spread fast. Within hours, donations started coming in from across the country. Companies pledged support. Charities reached out. Even politicians commented, calling it a necessary change. But the biggest reaction came from the people. From parents teaching their kids about bravery, from workers wondering if they'd be protected if they ever did the right thing, from those who had once stayed silent, afraid of losing too much. Now, there was hope. Back at home, he watched the interview on a small TV in the living room. His family sat around him eating breakfast, eyes glued to the screen. His mother wiped her eyes with a napkin. "That man," she said softly, "he hasn't forgotten what you did." He didn't respond. He just kept watching. When the interview ended, the phone rang again. Same number as before. He picked it up. It was the older man from earlier. "The response has been incredible," he said. "People are inspired. But more than that, they're ready to help." He paused, then added, "We're putting together a team. We want you involved. Not just your name, your voice, your story." He took a deep breath. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I never asked for any of this." "I know," the man replied. "But sometimes life gives you a chance to stand for something bigger than yourself." There was silence on the line. Finally, he spoke. "I'll think about it." That was all he could promise, for now. By evening, the street outside his house was packed again. Reporters, supporters, even local radio stations had set up shop. Someone brought a boombox and played music. Kids ran around laughing, chasing each other between the luxury cars like it was a dream come true. Neighbors came by to chat. Some brought food. Others just wanted to shake his hand. One man, older, with a cane, approached slowly. "I've lived in this neighborhood my whole life," he said. "Never seen anything like this." He smiled politely. "But I'll tell you one thing," the old man continued. "People remember kindness, and they remember who stands up for others." He nodded, unsure what to say. "You did good," the man said, tapping his shoulder gently. "Don't let nobody tell you different." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, he stood alone in the backyard. The city lights blinked, far off in the distance. The air was cool, the sky clear. He thought about everything that had happened: the crash, the rain, the choice he made, the job he lost. And now, these cars, these messages, this sudden spotlight. It was overwhelming, but deep down, he knew one thing. Doing the right thing hadn't been easy, but it had mattered, and maybe, just maybe, it still would. The next morning, he stood outside again, looking at the row of cars still parked along the street. Some had been moved overnight by reporters or police, but most were still there, gleaming in the early sunlight like something out of a dream. He walked up to one of them, placed his hand on the hood, and just stood there for a moment. It was warm from the sun, real, not fake, but also not his. That thought kept coming back, not because he didn't appreciate the gesture, but because he didn't need any of this. He didn't save someone's life expecting a reward. That wasn't why he ran into the rain that night. Still, here, it was, 10 luxury cars, and now the whole world knew about it. Reporters came back early. Some stood near the sidewalk speaking into cameras. Others waited quietly for him to come out. A few kids played hopscotch across the driveway, pretending they lived in a movie. Inside the house, his phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from strangers, from companies, from people who wanted to help. One message stood out. It was from a young man in another city. He wrote, "I saw what you did. I don't have much money or power, but I want to be like you. I want to do the right thing, even when it's hard." He read that twice. Then he sat down, leaned back, and closed his eyes. This wasn't just about him anymore. Later that day, a small group showed up at his door. Not reporters, not fans, just regular people. A teacher, a nurse, a mechanic, and a local community leader. They introduced themselves politely and asked if they could talk for a few minutes. He invited them in. They sat around the living room, sipping tea, talking about what had happened. About how rare it was to see someone risk everything for a stranger. "You know," said the teacher, "a lot of kids these days think heroes only exist on screens. But you're real, and that matters." He nodded slowly. "I just did what felt right," he said. "That's exactly why people look up to you," replied the nurse. "Because you didn't think about rewards. You didn't hesitate, you just acted." The conversation went on for a while. They talked about the foundation being built in response to his actions, about how the billionaire had decided to turn this moment into something bigger than just one person. "People like you should never suffer for doing good," the community leader added. "That's what this is about. It's not about giving you a car. It's about making sure others can do the same without fear." He listened carefully. Then he asked a question he hadn't thought to ask before. "What happens next?" The mechanic smiled. "That's up to you," he said. A few days later, he got a chance to answer that question. He was invited to speak at a local event, a gathering of volunteers, first responders, and everyday people who had done something brave. The organizers wanted him to share his story. At first, he wasn't sure. He wasn't a speaker. He wasn't used to standing in front of crowds. He didn't like attention. But then he remembered the message from the young man online, remembered the faces of the kids playing near the cars, remembered the way his mother looked at him like she'd always known he had it in him. So he agreed. The night of the event, he stood backstage, nervous, hands shaking slightly. The room was full, hundreds of people waiting to hear what he had to say. When his name was called, he stepped onto the stage, blinking under the lights. For a moment, he just stood there. Then he began. "I didn't plan to be here," he said, voice steady. "Didn't plan to be standing in front of all of you. Didn't plan to lose my job or wake up to 10 fancy cars outside my house." A few people chuckled. "But what I did plan," he continued, "was to help someone in trouble. Because that's what we should do. That's what we can do. Doesn't matter who we are, doesn't matter where we come from. When someone needs us, we should be there." The room fell silent. "I didn't do anything special," he said. "I just chose to care." Applause broke out, slow at first, then growing louder, until the whole room was on its feet. Afterward, people came up to him, shook his hand, thanked him. Some asked for advice. Others just wanted to say they were proud of him. He stayed late, answering questions, listening, smiling more than he had in weeks. Back home that night, he sat on the porch, watching the stars. His mother joined him. "You spoke from your heart today," she said. He smiled. "I just told the truth." She reached over, patted his hand. "That's why people listen." He looked out at the quiet street, at the cars still sitting there, untouched. "I don't want any of those cars," he said after a while. She raised an eyebrow. "But maybe someone else could use them." She nodded slowly. "You're your father's son," she said softly. He smiled at that. Inside, his phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from the older man, the one who worked with the billionaire. "We've started getting applications for the Courage Fund. People from all over. Teachers, nurses, workers, parents. All asking for help because they did the right thing and paid the price." He read it again. Then he typed back, "Tell them they're not alone." He hit send, then leaned back, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. Things weren't perfect, but maybe, just maybe, they were starting to change. The days passed, but the attention didn't fade. If anything, it grew. News outlets kept showing clips of him standing on his porch, surrounded by luxury cars. Social media still buzzed with messages of support. People shared stories about their own quiet heroes. Teachers who stayed late to help students, neighbors who fed families during hard times, workers who spoke up when they saw something wrong. But for him, the spotlight was starting to feel heavy. He wasn't used to being watched this closely. He wasn't used to strangers knowing his face, and he definitely wasn't used to seeing his name trending online. Still, he tried to stay grounded. Each morning, he walked outside, checked the mail, said good morning to whoever happened to be nearby. Some days, reporters were still camped, out on the sidewalk. Other days, it was just curious neighbors or kids who came by to take selfies with the cars. He never turned anyone away. If someone asked for advice, he gave it. If someone wanted to talk, he listened. If a kid asked if they could sit in one of the cars, he smiled and said, "Just don't touch anything." One afternoon, he got a call from the older man again, the one who worked with the billionaire. "We need to talk," the voice said on the other end. They met later that week at a small cafe not far from his house. The place was quiet, mostly empty. Just a few people reading books or sipping coffee in the corner. The older man sat across from him, placed a folder on the table, and pushed it toward him. "This is what we've built so far," he said. He opened the folder slowly. Inside were documents, plans, and outlines for the Langford Courage Fund. There were details about how the money would be used, how people could apply for help, and how decisions would be made. There was even a page titled Advisory Council, Proposed. Members. His name was at the top. He looked up. "I'm not sure I know enough about this kind of thing," he said honestly. "You know more than most," the older man replied. "You lived it. You lost your job. You faced the consequences of doing the right thing. That's more experience than any degree." He thought about it for a while. He wasn't sure he wanted to be part of something this big. He didn't want to become a public figure or spend his life giving speeches. But then he remembered the message from the young man online, remembered the way people had responded when he spoke at the event, remembered the faces of those who had been helped just because someone finally stood up for them. Maybe this was his chance to do something bigger than himself. He closed the folder and nodded. "I'll help," he said, "but not for me, for everyone else like me." The older man smiled. "That's exactly why you're the right person." Over the next few weeks, things started to change, not just for him, but for others too. The foundation officially launched. Its mission was simple: protect everyday heroes. Anyone who risked their livelihood to help another human being could apply for support, and the applications poured in. A nurse who lost her job after reporting unsafe conditions at a hospital. Teacher who was fired for defending a student from bullying. A delivery driver who crashed his truck trying to avoid hitting a child crossing the street. A factory worker who spoke up about dangerous machinery and was let go the next day. These weren't famous people. They weren't rich, but they had all done the right thing and paid the price for it. The fund began helping them, providing temporary income, legal aid, sometimes even new job opportunities. And every time a new case was approved, he got a message, letting him know. It felt strange at first, being part of something like this. He still didn't see himself as a leader or an expert. But he did believe in the cause, because he knew firsthand what it felt like to lose everything for doing the right thing. And now, he was helping make sure others wouldn't have to suffer alone. Back home, life was slowly returning to normal, or as normal as it could be with 10 luxury cars parked outside. Reporters still came by, but less often now. The crowd had thinned. The excitement had cooled down a little. Still, people remembered. Neighbors still waved. Kids still pointed at the cars. Strangers still thanked him for what he did. One evening, a young woman showed up at his door. She introduced herself as a writer working on a book about modern-day heroes. She asked if she could interview him. At first, he hesitated. "I don't think my story is that special," he said. She smiled. "It's not about being special," she said. "It's about being human, about choosing kindness when it's easier not to." That stuck with him. Later that night, he sat outside again watching the sky turn dark. His mother joined him. "You've changed a lot of lives," she said softly. He shook his head. "No," he said. "I just did what felt right. The rest just followed." She looked at him for a long moment. "That's what makes you different," she said. "You don't look for praise, you don't chase rewards, you just live with heart." He smiled. "I guess I learned that from you." She reached over, took his hand, and I couldn't be prouder. As the days went on, he started thinking about what came next. He knew he couldn't stay in the spotlight forever. He didn't want to. He liked simple things, early mornings, quiet nights, helping where he could. But he also knew he had a chance to leave something behind. Something bigger than himself. So he started talking to local schools about visiting. He agreed to mentor a few young people who wanted to learn more about making the right choices, even when it was hard. He donated one of the cars to a charity auction, then another, and another. By the end of the month, only 2 remained. When someone asked why he gave them away, he simply said, "I didn't save a life for a reward. I did it because it was the right thing to do. These cars? They should help someone else do the same." The world kept moving. New stories filled the news. The headlines shifted. Life went on. But somewhere, deep inside, people remembered. They remembered the man who ran into the rain, who pulled a stranger from a wreck, who lost his job for doing the right thing, and who, in return, received 10 luxury cars, but chose to give them away, because he believed in something greater. Not fame, not fortune, but kindness, and the idea that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't have to cost everything. The noise from the outside world slowly faded. The reporters stopped coming. The cameras moved on to new stories. The cars were long gone, donated, sold, or given to those who needed them more. Life returned to something closer to normal. But something had changed, not just for him, but for everyone who had watched his story unfold. He still woke up early every morning, still made coffee, still walked around his neighborhood, still said good morning to whoever was out. But now, when people saw him, they didn't just see a man who once saved someone's life. They saw hope. They saw proof that doing the right thing still mattered, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to make them do the same. One day he got a letter in the mail. It wasn't fancy, no gold seal, no expensive paper, just a plain envelope with his name handwritten on the front. Inside was a simple message. "I used to believe that doing the right thing wouldn't get me anywhere, that nobody would notice, that I'd just lose everything for trying. But then I saw what you did, and I realized maybe that's not true. So I spoke up. I stood up for someone who needed help, and yes, I lost my job too. But this time I didn't feel alone. Thank you." He read it twice. Then he folded it carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and smiled. That's when he knew. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about all of them. The quiet heroes, the unnoticed ones, the people who chose kindness even when it hurt. And now, because of what he did, they weren't afraid to speak up. A few weeks later, he visited the site of the crash again. It was quiet. The road looked the same as it always had. Cars passing by, traffic lights blinking, people walking without a second thought. But for him, it meant something different now. He stood there for a while, hands in his pockets, watching the rain fall, softly. He remembered the night it happened, the cold, the fear, the sound of breaking glass. He remembered running into the storm, pulling someone from a wreck, not knowing if they would live. And he remembered waking up the next morning to find out he'd lost his job. It hadn't felt fair then, but now he understood. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't come with a reward. Sometimes it costs you something. But sometimes, just sometimes, it starts something bigger than yourself. Back home, he sat on the porch with his mother, watching the sunset. She handed him a cup of tea and sat beside him. "You've done well," she said. He shook his head. "I just did what I had to do," she smiled. "That's why people follow you." He looked at her. I never wanted to be followed. I know, she said, but that's what makes you real. People don't follow titles or money. They follow heart. He sipped his tea, thinking. I don't want to be famous, he said after a while. I know, she replied. But you can still be a light. He looked at her again. A light? She nodded. Even the smallest flame, she said, can guide someone through the dark. He smiled. Maybe she was right. Not long after that, something unexpected happened. The city reached out. They wanted to create a new position, a public safety ambassador role focused on community trust, youth mentorship, and emergency response. Training. It wasn't exactly security work, but it was close. More importantly, it was meaningful. He accepted. And so, for the first time since losing his job, he stepped into a new uniform. Not as a guard, but as a leader. He taught young people how to stay safe. He trained others in first aid. He helped build stronger connections between neighborhoods and local services. And every time he spoke, he told the same story. About a rainy night. About a car crash. About a choice he couldn't take back. And about the price he paid for doing the right thing, because he believed that if one person heard it and decided to act differently, then it was worth it. As the months went on, the Langford Courage Fund continued to grow. More people applied. More lives were changed, and every time a new case came through, he reviewed it personally. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. Because he knew what it felt like to be alone after doing the right thing. And now, he was helping make sure nobody else had to feel that way. One evening, he received an invitation. A school wanted him to speak to their students. At first, he hesitated. He wasn't a speaker. He wasn't used to standing in front of kids, but then he remembered how many times he wished he had someone like himself to look up to when he was younger. So he agreed. The day of the event, he walked into the auditorium and saw hundreds of young faces staring back at him. He took a deep breath, then he began. I'm not here to tell you I'm special, he said. I'm not rich, I'm not famous, I'm not even sure I belong on this stage. Some of the kids laughed. But I am here to tell you this, he continued. You don't have to wait for permission to do the right thing. You don't need a title, a medal, or a reward. All you need is courage. He paused. And sometimes, he added, courage means standing up when everyone else sits down. It means helping someone even when it's easier not to. It means doing what's right, even when it costs you something. There was silence for a moment, then slow applause, then louder, then the whole room was clapping. And in that moment, he knew. His story wasn't over. It had only just begun. Months later, a small plaque was placed near the spot where the accident happened. It read, Here stood a man who chose humanity over rules. No name, no date. Just a reminder that even in the darkest moments, even when it seems like the world won't notice, you can still choose to do the right thing. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change the world.